Michael, welcome back. Seems like it's been a lifetime since we sat and did a podcast like this, just in time, but also in experience. And when I say welcome back, it's welcome back to the podcast, but also welcome back from traveling around the world, fulfilling your stewardship. And as you came back to Iowa, I can't imagine seeing your field, literally your field, not your ministry field, but your field on the farm. And while you've been gone, I took care, make sure we had plenty of rain while you were traveling. But what was it like to come back to your anchor, your safe space, and look out across your fields and see the progress that's taken place on your farm, and relate a bit to what's in your head about progress to what you're doing when you're not on the farm?
Yeah, boy, Jay, it is good to be back. It's good to be traveling, equipping leaders, and it's good to be home. So when I left, our crop was like this tall, just this tall. And now when you come back and you look at the fields, they're 12 foot tall. They're 4 meters tall. And we did have plenty of rain, which is a rare thing for this time of year in these parts.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And the amount of growth that's on them, the amount of bountiful harvest that's potential that's out there, to see them. So I went with my son and my father when I got back, and we looked at the plants. They're green from top to bottom. This time of year, we lack rain. We get a lot of hot sun. And so the bottom 2 feet can be fired, can be brown, whereas pushing all the nutrients to the reproducible, to the seed, the reproducible parts. And it is healthy crop out there. It's fun to see, but it's also, to your point, because you put in a lot of labor. You put in a lot of labor, and you want a bountiful harvest. So come September, middle of September, October is when we'll begin harvest. So that's just right around the corner. But to your second point of the harvest and the kingdom that God is building, I'm traveling around helping leaders, network leaders, produce a crop that's not on this side of heaven. Now, some of it is the now part. Some of it is now. You live a full, abundant life now and find your meaning and purpose in this world and through the faith. And some of it is later in the future when he fully sets up his kingdom. But yeah, to see that we leave and it's this big, and then to see it's 12 foot tall, the roots are deep, the roots are adequate moisture, being well established. And the other thing, Jay, is my son, the third generation on this particular farm. Now 6 generations in totality have been in agriculture in the States, in my heritage, but third generation on this farm. He's really, when I came back, I noticed a lot more just personal ownership of his, wanting to learn more, taking initiative on his own, able to do things, drive big pieces of equipment, able to do things all on his own that even a short few months ago he was not doing. So even seeing that progression is rewarding.
When I see it, living in both worlds like you do, I see both come together with your son, and asking him what he's learning, and seeing him become established in the business of agriculture, and the hard things like figuring out how to spray and doing the calculations. And I said, well, you're a businessman, you're a scientist, and you're a chemist, and the complexity of that. But that's exactly what you were about as you went to India, and then traveled across Asia after that. I know you mentioned the number of flights you got on and off of. And I think that's a good window to look through to get a sense of the work that you did and how much investment we have in those leaders. And talk about just the exhausting nature, but then the results that come from that as you were on and off flights all the time.
Yeah, when you grow up, let me talk about growing up for just a moment.
Your youth is behind you.
Yeah, my youth is behind me,
much.
but I remember learning about Paul's missionary journeys. And you'd, in your classrooms and educational systems, you'd have Paul's missionary journey, his first one, his second one, his third one. He'd have them mapped out, and he'd go to this city, this city, this city. And I was just enamored with those things. Mm-hmm. But they were still, they're a long time ago, they're a long time off. This doesn't really happen today. You just learn them as a historical piece. And again, on this particular trip, I was struck by, these are what, in a sense, regular people who have the calling. You're just regular people, but you're sent to these different cities, and the Spirit is raising up people who want to get back to the early church patterns. It is happening all over the place. So yeah, I was in 8 or 9 different mega cities across India and across other large Asian country, and I think I was on 21 different flights. And it is a logistics nightmare. Thank goodness someone is helping me keep track of all that, someone here and someone in India, because you have endless conversations with people. People are passionate. They want to stay up till the wee hours of the morning, till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. One of the nights I had a flight at, I think it was 8 a.m., so I had to leave. I had to be there at 6:30 a.m. at the airport. It means you have to leave for the airport at 5 a.m. And I got back to the hotel at 2:30. So, you got a couple hours of sleep, and then you're on your way to the next city. And that was the pattern of this 3 weeks. This mega city, you meet with 3-4 different networks of people and their leaders over a course of a day and a half, 2.5 days, maybe 3. I don't think I was in a city longer than 72 hours. So it's exhausting work. You're burning the candle at both ends, but it's also very rewarding because you get to invest in leaders that are building his church and really have all the same. It's interesting. You get to see that many people around a wide span of geographical territory, and yet the Spirit has them in very similar places.
And this trip I so wanted to go on this trip just for the Turkey component. But you're talking about growing up with reading about the missionary trips of Paul and being in Turkey years ago and standing in a place where John had lived. Mm-hmm. And it was just like yesterday. You could see, it was in caves. It was a monastery. Mm-hmm. And yet the reality of it, you're in that hotbed for centuries of the church, and your role is to make sure that hotbed keeps growing and spreading.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, I've never had to travel that kind of intensity, so I can imagine how hard that is on you, in and out. And yet, this is from our end, watching you travel, the energy that comes out of your church that you're in, our church, investing and pouring that energy back to you across the world. That whole concept of network and what's happening in our time with your stewardship to root the way of Christ and the apostles. And at the same time, watching a new Paul, you got to experience a new Paul being raised up on your travels.
Yeah, I did. So I was in to me, it was out of nowhere. And it was someone that we had not directly been investing in it was someone I met for the first time. But one of the networks we've been working with, a ring outside or another ring outside an area of influence, he brought me to him. He was encouraged about him, and I met this guy, and he's a Paul. He's a modern day Paul. Now, why do I say that? He was born in this city, and it's a fairly big city in India, but a mid-sized city, and surrounded by many, many different villages. Well, Christ finds him, and he begins to learn the biblical text as a way to learn about what to do with this newfound faith that he has. And our leaders about 15 or 20 years ago came up, leaders that we've been equipping, came up and began to teach him. And now to the point where he's got churches all over that city. He's got a strategy all throughout these villages, all in all these different tongues of which he speaks because he grew up in the area. And he's formed a team. He talked to me about his hubs, his different clusters, and how he's pulled the churches together. He's talked to me about how he's developing his elders and elders in every cluster and every set of churches, because he talked about Titus 1, 5 through 9. He talked about 1 Timothy 3. So he talked about a team that stirs amongst like Paul's team. He talked about networks of churches that are always expanding and networks of churches that are always being established by qualified elders who are set up like fathers and mothers at every place. So in the first 10 minutes of meeting this man, I knew right away that he's a Paul for that region. And I knew right away that the strategy of working with leaders, now there's a lot of social justice things that we can be doing around the world as Christians, but I'm telling you, Jay, the strategy of working with leaders has exponential impact. Exponential. Because leaders are equipping, I mean, this guy has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people and hundreds and hundreds of churches that is just in his network of work. And I met numerous people on this trip like that. But he was in the front end of my trip, and just a rewarding to see and to report back to the community here that's what we're experiencing.
So here you have a leader that's a product of your work that you'd never met, from the spontaneous expansion, the way the model's supposed to work. Talk about the impact emotionally, the satisfaction. How did you feel knowing that these leaders are being raised up because of the rooting that you're doing and the work the other leaders are doing, both for this Paul, but also then, your second generation leader you saw in Pune.
Oh,
what did that feel like to you?
Yeah, well,
I can't imagine.
Honestly, how does it feel? It's really rewarding. Like as soon as you get back into the vehicle and they're transporting you another place, I think, I'll say it this way, Jay, the first 10 minutes when you reflect, you're like, my goodness, that was great. But minute 11 and 12, you start thinking, boy, they've got so much work ahead of them.
Exactly.
and so it's a bit of like you're on to the next thing. You're nothing, no joy, just like lasts for the whole day. It seems it's so rewarding and so fulfilling. There's just moments where you're just completely fulfilled, and yet in the same day and in the same hour, you have it where you're just completely exhausted. You completely wonder if it's all worth it, and you think, am I making any difference anywhere? And so you can have these dichotomous ways of thinking, but this is where the community comes back in, because I would message the community, send them these things, and then my mind would start to drift, and I'd feel a little bit like a Jonah or something. And then I'd hear from the church back here, and they'd say, wow, and what great progress, and point out things that I was not thinking about, focusing on, and boy, that would lift my spirits. So I think part of the answer to your question is, it is really fulfilling, and while at the same time, it's just completely, you give everything you have, and it completely drains you.
Yeah, that immediate sense, and then the realization of what this means is, the exaltation of success, but then the reality of which means more work.
It's more work, and they have a lifetime ahead of them, and of work, and we have a lifetime of work here in our network of churches that we're leading, and I think it's just a reality of life on this side, and second generation churches in Pune, they two different networks in particular. I spent some extended time with them. They're leaders that are in their, some were in their 20s, so that's borderline maybe third generation, but many in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, early 50s. My goodness, Jay, they would stay up with me till 2 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning.
They're still young.
And we'd start at 4 in the afternoon, and they would dialogue and question and dialogue, and they're anxious to learn. So I met with a group of leaders that came from all different churches, and we gathered in a home and ate together and prayed together and sang together and cried together. I mean, they're experiencing some conflict that's been going on for a long time, and it's actually reached a point where it's ended. And so they were celebrating that, while at the same time mourning that it had to happen, and they were mourning that some of the leaders weren't there anymore. They were also mourning that some young leaders had to step up. They were excited, but yet they were like deers. Just that doesn't communicate, but they were excited, but yet they were really
Sobered,
nervous.
Yes,
sobered by what the work that was in front of them. So those second generation leaders, what a beautiful set of people that are passionate about building simple churches and building it as a family. And I've met with them a couple different times now, and this time was no exception to all the others of their passion and their desire to do this well, to build God's kingdom as a church family.
Such a good description, because it's 2025 language communicating the same thing that Paul wrote about his experiences as he worked with churches, that up and down of the exaltation of success of the work, but the pressures that come with that. And to hear it in modern language, your experience, I think as we read those letters, I think it can help us relate to, that's exactly what's happening right now. Nothing's changed. We still got the work in front of us. We have plenty to do till we die.
Yeah, I mean, I say they'll stay up till 2 a.m. Well, part of it's on me because I'm leaving the next day. And so I'm only going to be there this amount of time. And so as long as I'll stay awake, they'll stay awake. And we'll talk for 12 hours because tomorrow morning I'm moving on. I've got to move on to the next place and invest into them and their leaders and their work. So
thankfully, nobody fell out the window and died.
Nobody fell out the window like
fell off the plane.
X-20, but no, you get on the plane and you get a couple hours of sleep, hopefully.
Yeah, and North India, this is exciting. How are things as you moved into North India?
Yeah, so I spent the last part of my India trip in the north, meeting with some of those leaders. It's an area that we continue to focus on, an area that continues to have a lot of upfront evangelism, a lot of upfront spreading. I would say a wildfire. They're trying to light the fire and spread it. Which are good things, but that's been happening for a lot of years. And what really needs to happen is the next step of the Pauline cycle. And that is to gather people into churches and have leaders appointed in those churches that build them and structure them as families, that know the teachings, know the framework of the New Testament, and can bring that to the people so they have a way to think, to honor their governments, to live as a family in their individual families, to see the church as the centerpiece of Christ's plan, so they dedicate their priorities to the church family, and then to get around the apostles' teaching as a way of living with Christ's mind and his wisdom in this world. And we have to secure the fruit. Otherwise, a lot of the times the fruit, people will come and they'll say the formula of the gospel, but then a month, 2 months, a year, 3 years later, they recede back to where they were in life and into other faiths. So it's a big need right now, and it was good to spend time with people who were born there, grew up there, And you can see God's have instilled a passion in them to reach their cities, to reach their areas. It's something that people who are not born there, it's different. Not born there, you can go there and we can make a difference, but to work with people who are born there, and you can see they have a calling for their people. It's their people. It's what an opportunity to be able to find people like this, and then to give them the framework of the New Testament.
Well, I remember having conversations at the last summit with leaders from North India. That is exactly what you described. All these people being evangelized, but just like the reality of we don't have leaders now. How do we make this happen? So to have you be able to meet them on their turf and get to know them, it's got to be support for them. So many people can hear what has to happen.
Yeah.
And you can give them that message in the context of the full network that we talked about earlier, that that network is what holds us all together. And the fruit will be lost if they're not pulled into community.
That's right.
They're stuck out there as individuals. And then you traveled on, further into Asia, your Asian trip. Somebody should be mapping all this to keep track of, it'd just be a solid line for all the times you cross it in these places. But what happened as you traveled out of India?
So I went to another large country in Asia, and I ended up in 4 different large cities and met with endless amount of networks, probably 13 or 14 different.
I'm sure it felt like it.
It felt like endless, but endless amount of leaders, because you meet with the top leaders, and you meet with the leadership team, then you meet with the larger leadership teams. And you do that for each network. So multiply those 3 or 4 conversations times 13. It's a lot of conversations over a 10, 12-day period. These conversations are always surrounded by food. And I'm telling you, good food. And hospitality of the people are just, it's amazing. No matter where you go, what you're doing, food pulls people together. It's no mistake that baptism, you need a simple thing like water. And to share the bread and the cup, you have a meal.
Yeah, what's at the core of the gathering? It's a meal.
It's a meal. There's no mistake in 1 Corinthians 11:17 through 14:40 that Paul's talking about the meal. He's talking about a full meal, and he's talking about the symposium. He's talking about a discussion, and I feel like we had that 13 times 4. We had that so many times, and so just to reflect on, you don't get together and you meet in a meeting room. I mean, some of the handful of times I did, but most of the time you're getting together and you're eating food, you're celebrating. Man, the fruit is, as a little excursus here, man, the fruit is so good, so juicy. Never had such good fruit. Every time I'm there, it's such great food. So, that's and people, again, that are passionate around reaching their cities, around reaching their people, around reaching people groups. Many of them have maybe started in the rural and come into the urban. Some are started in the urban and reaching the urban. So quite a difference in some of the networks we're working with. But again, all of them are passionate to get back. How can we get back to the early church paradigms, the patterns? How can we read the text in such a way to garner the wisdom out of it and the framework of it, and not have a big church with a worship service, with a praise and worship service? You just don't see that in the text, and yet that's what most Christians think is the work of building Christ's kingdom, is building a building with a preaching point and praise and worship points, and working with these leaders in this large Asian country across all these cities. Again, it just matches what God's raising up across the Middle East, North Africa. You speak of Turkey and India, and in other large Asian countries.
When your stewardship was to take to scale the way of Christ and the apostles. And I remember sitting in a room with a whiteboard. We were sorting out leadership roles early on in your tenure. And now we're, how many years in? I want to say 10, but I just pull a number out of there because I don't know.
I don't know.
Just the other day. In that process, how would you evaluate scaling that's happening around the world right now? Hearing your trips, your conversations, I get a sense that things are scaling, but how would you frame scalability right now?
Yeah, I think I was in my end of my second week. I had 1 week to go. So at this point, you'd been away for 2 weeks. You've talked with, I've probably had over 100 meetings at that point, 100 different conversations, and 2 sleepless nights. I was reading my journal here a little bit before we started, just reminding myself of the 2 sleepless nights. And at one of those mornings, towards the end of that second week, I got a text from someone that says, we're putting 250 of our leaders into one of our training pathways. And I looked at it, and that was great. And I responded with some simple message. And a little bit later, I remember thinking, that's a big deal.
You want to see those check marks? You just saw 250 check marks.
250 leaders that are, some of them are leading networks of churches. So that's not 250 churches. That's, probably, a couple thousand churches.
Geometric progression, you start looking it out.
But it's interesting how your mind sometimes begins to, it's almost like corn yields. We could have a huge corn yield this year. But your brain and your mind as a human, you get used to certain numbers. And so I think as it comes to scaling, it's the New Testament plan, Christ's grand plan, his grand strategy for the gospel to go to the ends of the earth. It is scalable, Jay. And leadership development should be in a scalable system. It doesn't. Again, our Sunday morning system isn't scalable, but neither is our leadership development system is not scalable. So we had in the last 10 days here an online where we were working with each civilization. We had close to about 1,000 people, leaders, that are working through pathways for 10 days. So that's just in the last that's all just in the last 7 days.
Yeah.
Of when I've gotten back from the trip. One of those many networks says, we're going to put 2, and that's in a master's level program. So they would get the equivalent of what a master's of would be in the Western system. So that's a pretty high credential in that world, in any part of the world. But it's not the credential. It's that they want to be a master craftsman of the faith at one of the highest levels. And that's just that's exciting because that's reproducible, Jay. We had one of the leaders that said they before we started talking to them, they said they sent like 400 of their leaders out to this Western Bible college and seminary system, and their lights were on before they left, and they could really teach. He said, we sent them there for 2 years. We raised all this money because it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. We had to get them to live there. They had to pay a high cost of tuition and room and board. And he said when they came back, their lights were off and all they could do was preach, but they couldn't teach. Mm. And so he was, as a leader, he was quite frustrated and just saying, we need a leadership system that's scalable, but it is also producing more Timothys and more Paul types and more elders, because these churches need elders and fathers and mothers. They don't need lecturers. And so that was quite a conversation I had with another one of the leaders in the trip. Christ system's scalable, Jay. It's scalable. You can It's supposed to be reproducing just like the book of Acts until he comes back. And you can see it. You can see it happening all around the world. It's
patterned after Acts.
It's patterned after Acts.
That cycle of going away and then coming back to rediscover, dusting off the book to find that Pauline cycle, and then seeing here locally is complete the teachings on the New Testament, of seeing, James and his team and their input in that, and John and his team and the input in that, and seeing that, but it all fits together. I mean, it's one system. They aren't separate. They aren't off on their own mission. It's all building Christ Church.
Mm-hmm.
That's thinking of the way you described it with the leaders, where they realize, that soberness of what's in front of us. But I'm sure coming home, back to Iowa, farm boy, seeing what's happening here, seeing what's happening there, it's the same thing. Young leaders being energized, putting it all together. One of the things that you reflected on in your journey that you sent to me was, it touched my heart because I could see myself in that same story. Share with us that reflection, the reflections that you had on your trip, especially thinking back to how your roots. We started the conversation with roots. We'll end it with roots, of how your roots have prepared you to have the nutrients, the energy to carry out this work.
Yeah, I'm a reflective person. I
haven't noticed that. There's a pair of us right here.
There's a pair of us right here, and we take up a lot of reflective space.
A lot of paper's been used up.
A lot of paper's been used up, yeah. Near the end of this trip, I keep track of these things and journal and attach pictures to it, and some things are just more factual. This is what happened. This is the day. This is the time. This is the number of flight. And then other things are reflective, these people are saying this. I think it connects to this. I think this is what the Spirit is saying. This is the significance of what's happening in this situation and across all these situations. So towards the end of the trip, I was reflecting on how I grew up compared to where I've been in the last 3 weeks. I grew up in a very small town. And in fact, I didn't grow up in the town. I grew up in the rural area. So I was thinking about at one of the dinners I was at, there's more people around one table than there was in my couple miles square neighborhood that a person may call a neighborhood. And most everyone I met has no idea of what that's like. They're used to being surrounded by 10 million people, 22 million people, 28 million people in these different cities. And so you begin to think to yourself, why would God call a small town boy who's grew up around 11 people? Why would he call him to be in these bigger cities? And so I wrote a page reflection on that. And I didn't so much answer the question about why, other than I said, this is what he's put in front of us. And so you have nothing else to do but to accept the call. He's put leadership in my ancestors' blood, in my heritage, in the 6 generations before me. He's put paradigm, passion into my bones. Just that, why would you get excited about paradigms, Jay? I mean, it's not like most people think about sets of patterns in the world, and they start to snooze. They start to get bored.
You've got one of the few people that think about paradigms sitting here with you.
I like to think about patterns, sets of patterns, and cultures, and macro cultures, and micro cultures, and why do people do what they do? What's the framework in which people think? And that gives them meaning and purpose. I love reading all the papers in the cities when I'm in the cities, and learning about why they title things the way they do, and reading the articles and asking people that are helping you just a little bit about the city and the cultures, and And I spun the table counterclockwise once instead of clockwise. That was in one part of one city. That was that you don't do that. But you answer paradigm, passion in our bones. And the other thing is a community. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity. That would be the fourth thing. But back to the third thing, there's a community of people here that are also passionate about getting back to patterned like acts across the world. And we've gotten an opportunity for it, and they support it. And the hands that push you towards it all the time, they scream over the dims of doubt. So that's what it is. It's got two pictures of contrast. One picture is 6 or 7 years old. I'm standing with my two sisters with fields surrounding me, waiting for my school bus with a little note on my shoulder that was pinned to me by my mother in case I got lost amongst the crowd of 30 people of when I went into the city, which was the small town. And then it's contrasted. I'm overlooking Nanjing, and I don't know how many people are in Nanjing, 20-some million, I think, 22 million maybe, and I'm looking over the skyline, and it's just endless city, and people are there finding their meaning, their purpose, and living their life. And such a contrast to my first 18 years of life, and that's what the reflection's about.
Yeah, and of course that spun me into thinking about that, and being also a very reflective person who, one other common childhood connection we have is trees. And I was thinking of that growing up in a space where there was just a handful of people, you had a lot of time to reflect. I remember spending time laying under this cottonwood tree and just watching the leaves dance in the wind and contemplating the world. So it gives you an orientation to take time and space, even in the din of the city, to reflect and lay those foundations. So it's not the wisdom of man, it's the wisdom of God that prepared a leader out of a small town, out of a farm community in Iowa. And we've heard that all through our history that, well, you're just hicks from Iowa. And thinking of those conversations, nobody really asks us, are you prepared for the work? They just make judgments because you're a farm boy from Iowa. You don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And yet that's God's way. He raises up leaders by what he needs, not by the systems of man. So, so that was very touching to me. But also, I can just see that's the beauty of being older. I can see your whole life in front of me, from beginning to end, and watch that work out. And as you approach the end of your life, for my generation, our generation, there's a few of us, still around, to watch that unfold, the joy and the satisfaction that brings, knowing that our work's on the diminishing side, yours just keeps ramping up. You find more Pauls, more work.
Yeah.
So thank you for the faith that brought you from rural Iowa to Nanjing, looking over the city with 900 people in the town I grew up in, and we only went to town once a week. So 30 people is just an overwhelming crowd.
That was a phrase, by the way. That's a phrase of country, rural people, as we say, we're going to go to town. We're going to go into town. And that's a small little thing, but boy, that was part of my own nomenclature when I was first married that I had to get used to. I would say, let's go into town, and my wife would say, what are you talking about? We're in the town. We live in the town. Yeah. We're not going into town. It
does show that separation.
Yeah.
Town we're out here, and it prepares you to work independently, but also as part of a community.
Yeah, and you were mentioning Johannine literature, and you were mentioning James, which is in the Petrine literature, and you're mentioning Paul. It's such a beautiful framework when you can understand the New Testament is really just three spheres, three sets of churches, church networks. Paul's network, the Petrine network, and John's network of churches. And there's overlap between all three. But I point that out because Revelation, we're going through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John right now, but soon we're going to be picking up Revelation here in about 2 months, 3 months. And I end my reflection with God is building his kingdom, and when he fully comes to set it up, you read in Revelation 19, Revelation 20, that the city, it's God's kingdom is a singular city that's as wide as it is long, as it is high. And so I end that reflection with that, because none of us get to choose where we're born and where we're born or who we're born to. And none of us get to choose the gifts we're given either. And nor do we really get to choose the opportunities that are presented to us in front of us. Now, we can not understand our own gifts, and we can say no to the opportunities in front of us. But if we understand what our role is in building Christ's kingdom, and we say yes to the opportunities that God presents us as a community, not as an individual per se, I'm talking more as a community. The community says, Michael, we see this in you. And the community says, we see this in you, Jay. You need to play this role for the kingdom. All of us are building that city wide as it is, long as it is, high, and that's what Revelation is talking about. So,
and wonderful. Still be going
city.
to town then.
Oh, we'll be in the town, Jay.
It is
the tree of life will be in the center, and so will the river of life will be right in the center of it. So you'll be able to lay underneath that tree and reflect.
And thinking about the sovereign foundations that God puts in our lives to prepare us to make a choice, to say yes or to say no. And thank God you said yes, and that, the work of your hands is being blessed. So may you enjoy the work of your hands and the fruit of your labor.
Yeah, Psalm 89.
So glad to have you home, and we get some time with you before we send you out again.
Yep. Good to be home, Jay. Good to be home.
Thanks for another month's conversation. Further up
and further in.